Hey guys, this is Kris with the Reformed Grognard, and I am here with what I plan to be a bi-weekly or possibly monthly podcast and video about projects on Kickstarter. I thought I would cover ones that I'm backing, ones that I think are interesting, and try and highlight a few that don't get much love on some of the other channels that do this kind of thing. I want to focus on both board games and RPGs and tabletop stuff, instead of just one or the other, because I find that especially the RPG stuff, they don't get a lot of attention unless they're in very specific circles. First off are the ones that I have currently backed in some capacity, although to be honest with you, a lot of these guys here, I'm probably going to end up dropping my pledges. Not necessarily because I don't think they're worthy of my support anymore, more so that I just am super broke this month and all of these are ending before my next convention. First off is Gatefall, which is a fantasy versus post-apocalyptic tabletop miniature game. This is from Jack Dyer, who did Super Fight, which is nothing like this. I'm intrigued by this. I feel like his Kickstarter price is so ludicrously low, it was hard for me to not back this game. But at the same time, the only thing that really super appeals to me about it is the artwork of the cover. I love the art on the cover. Alexei Konov did it, and I think he designed the miniatures as well. But the miniatures don't grip me the way the cover does. The cover art's amazing on it. Look at that. The minis are cool. The problem is the minis are huge. They're not minis. And my problem with that is, yeah, they're cool looking. Yeah, they're fun to paint. They're useless for anything else. And when you're talking about multi-genre stuff like this, and as cool as some of these figs are, I would love to use Gildry in some other fantasy campaign, but when he's that massive, he's completely useless unless you want him as a giant. Brog would make a sweet giant. Look how cool he is. But the scale on them, I hate giant minis. I have such a hard time with it because they don't understand that there's a standard scale for a reason, and it's not because we want to play your game. And I guess that's a horrible way of looking at it, but why not encourage every use of this as possible, especially where this is a fairly simple game. You're drawing a few cards, your actions, the board is super tiny, it's basically a skirmish game, and you're earning victory points basically and upgrading your hand, which is cool. I think it sounds really fun. I would have backed this in a heartbeat and would not even consider dropping my pledge if the minis were a more reasonable scale. I would rather have twice as many minis to choose from and have them be a fraction of this size. I mean, look how humongous they are. They're like ludicrously large. So, I don't know. I mean, they're not having any trouble getting their goal. They'll definitely hit 14. They've got 13 days to go still. 40, I mean, not 14. But I don't know. I'm probably going to end up canceling my pledge on this or dropping to $1 on it. It's just not. They're just too big to justify the cost for that. But anyway, Aetherfields, another Altered Realms one. I've backed this at the full core box level right now, but I'm having a really hard time staying in on it. I mean, you get an obscene amount of content on this. It's what they're calling a dream crawler, which is sort of a kind of a dungeon crawler with different aspects to it. It looks really interesting. You're kind of bouncing between some different world aspects. You've got these weird mask tokens that change the game in some ways. The board is fairly simple. It's really interesting. The cards lay down on it, and they're kind of lots of different worlds. They're huge. There's an obscene amount of content in this for $80, but I don't know, for some reason there's something about this game that's just not gripping me, and I feel like it should be. It feels like it's right up my alley. The minis are gorgeous, the art's interesting, the storyline is something that I should be into. but for some reason it's just not hitting me, and I'm just going to kind of have to deal with that. I think I'll probably end up canceling this. I do love the box. I think the idea of it's great. It's not going to look near as good in real life, obviously. But it is, I mean, it's massive. There's all these unlocked stretch goals that they've done. Look at all these unlocked goals. I mean, Altered Realms always does a solid job with their campaigns without question. I'm still waiting on Tainted Grail. And I've got to be honest, had I already gotten Tainted Grail, I would probably be more likely to continue on with this, but me dropping their pledge isn't going to hurt their feelings at all because they're currently at $3.1 million, so they'll probably survive without me. But it is cool. I can definitely understand why people are excited about it. It's just not $100 exciting for me right now. Trudvang Legends from CMON is one that I am more interested in, and I'm surprised at how poorly, in quotation marks, it's doing. It's only at 1.1 million right now. Paul Bonner, I've loved his artwork for ages. I'm not super familiar with Trudvang, which I guess is a RPG of some sort as well, but it's I'm so torn about this. First of all, they only have the 2 pledges. They have an early bird, which I did back at, and a legendary pledge. And the only difference is a $10 difference. They're not overloading this with all sorts of stuff. What you back is what you get, basically. Although I do think they did add a couple of add-ons. There's an art book, which I'm extremely tempted by, just because the art is the thing I love about this. So torn about this because I think the story system, it's got like a plastic slotted board that you put the cards down into, and it changes depending on your actions elsewhere in the world. But for some reason, these minis just really aren't hitting it for me. I don't know, like the sculpts seem a little soft from a CMON standpoint. They're sort of not that creative. The heroes in particular seem really boring to me. There's a griffin, which I do love griffins, but I don't know. I really want to be excited about this game, and I want to be excited about spending $100 on it, but there's so much about it beyond the game mechanics itself that just aren't striking to me. It's sort of a bag puller for fighting. You use runes in a sack that you pull out, and I think that's really interesting. I love the cohesive changing world aspect of it, but everything else is just kind of hitting soft for me. I also find their updates sort of obnoxious. It's written in this sort of pretentious script style that, for me, when I'm getting an update, I don't want to read a story. I want to know what's changing and in what way. So I don't know. The painted versions by Jen Haley are gorgeous. I cannot stand how beautiful they are, just like Bonner's art. But I don't know. I'll probably end up dropping this pledge as well. There's a few things coming out in the next couple of weeks that I'm very excited about that, unless they end up dropping the ball, they'll probably win my backing over these ones. There's just so much good stuff out right now. Another game that I wanted to love, but it just kind of fell flat for me, was Hard West, the board game. This was a horror strategy game, which is Wild West based, and those are literally my favorite things ever. There's 6 days left on this campaign. They're at $38,000 of a $75,000 goal. Their goal is lofty, but this game does come with a ton of stuff. The problem is that to get a standard edition of it, it's $113 before shipping, and it's really interesting. You're actually building a town, and then it's basically a skirmish game. There's not much else to say about it in terms of that. But again, the minis look like the sculpts are really soft on it. There's not a lot of detail in any of them that they're showing, and maybe they're not completed yet. But if they're not completed yet, they probably should have held off showing them, frankly, or at least shown the artwork with the extra detail to them. My other problem with this is that they are, again, giant minis. They're 50 millimeter instead of 35 or 28 or whatever. So as awesome as they are, you couldn't use them with Shadows of Brimstone or some RPG that you were playing because they're double the size of what they should be. Well, a third larger anyway. The mechanics are really interesting on it. It's got these really cool looking character dashboards that modify as you play. The artwork in it's good. The town building aspect of it, where you've got like different floors and walls and like these plastic pillars that you put on to build these things, is super cool. Love the idea of it. It really appeals to the miniature gamer in me. It also appeals to the Wild West aspect, and you get a ton for the money. I mean, there's like 90 walls and 80 action tokens and barrels and trees and benches, but if they'd gone standard 35 or 28 scale, I probably would be all in on this 100%. But with them being the bigger size, I have a hard time pulling for it. I would be really annoyed every time I went to play this game because the minis are so humongous. And they could have made the scale of everything smaller, which would have gotten it cheaper. It would have taken up less space on the table to play. I don't understand this trend of gigantic, oversized miniatures and game boards lately. Anyway, that was Hard West, the board game. That one's still got 6 days left in it. Complexity is another one that I'm torn about. It's not doing as well as it should, and it's surprising because everyone that looks at it thinks it should be doing better. It's from Sen-Fung Lim and Jay Cormier, who are both really well-respected creators. The artwork on the cover is wonderful. It's super intriguing, it's interesting, but the game itself is kind of meh. I don't know. I've gone through it a little bit. I like the designs that they have. I think they're unique looking, but it just doesn't do anything for me. I've watched a couple of the gameplay videos and like the previews on things, and it's kind of boring compared to the promise of that box cover there. Like, that box cover is super cool looking. It looks like Robot Sims, and I'm totally sold on that, but instead it looks like it plays as kind of a generic worker placement builder type thing. So, Innsmouth 32 is ending in 11 days and is about halfway to its goal of 19,000. I hope this one succeeds. I really like the designs. It's from Gamewick Games, and they did, I don't remember what the other one was called, Pittsburgh 68, which was the Night of the Living Dead inspired game. Their art's very comic book graphic novel inspired. In fact, they reference that. At one point they say the greatest horror movie you'll play. At another point they say it looks like a graphic novel and plays like a movie. And honestly, that's pretty legit. They've made some really interesting games. I think I've played Roswell 51 is the other one that they have, the shuffling horror stuff, and I've enjoyed it. I played it at SaltCon a couple years ago, I think. Innsmouth 32 looks really fun. Obviously, it's Lovecrafty and comic booky, and the art and graphic design in it's great. I'm kind of surprised it's doing as slowly as it is, but honestly, there's a lot of competition out there. Those are really the only 6 board games of note for me that are ending in the next 14 days. There's a bunch of other stuff out there, but I'm kind of trying to keep this to the 2-week ending date on there, just because there's just such a sheer amount of stuff to cover. Beyond that, we have RPGs and tabletop stuff, which I am trying to bring up. There we go. Starting with Klore Haven and the Goblin Grotto. Now, this is a printable scenery Kickstarter. They're at 90,000 of their $331 goal, but it's from Printable Scenery, who's done like 7 other Kickstarters, and they've been doing gaming terrain for a while, and they do good stuff. Their detailed work is it's simple, but it looks really good. I've seen one of these in person that someone had printed, not of this particular Kickstarter, but of a previous design that they'd done. This is really cool. It's interesting. I don't have a 3D printer, so I'm not super up to date on how much things cost, how much things really are charged generally. Klore Haven itself is $60 for the SRT or the STL files, so that you can print the entirety of this town, which includes a townhouse, a cottage, a homestead, a grand hostel, a cabin, a tavern, a chalet, and a watchtower. And they're all modular parts, so you can build your own pieces, you can build the parts the way you want. I really appreciate that they have different styles incorporated into it. They've got the Tudor and the schist, different types of roofs, ruins, and fences. It's really cool. The one that excites me the most about this, though, is the Goblin Grotto portion. And it's a separate pledge, or you can get both of them and get the STLs for both. And these ones are a lot more natural looking. They're these, like, underground cave-looking grottos. And, like, the walls and the floors, they're just really fun. Like, these would be a blast to play on. I really like all the designs. The shrines and the creatures in them are really cool. This Gloom Creeper is, like, this mushroom cake tentacle monster. I think they're really neat. Man, if I had a 3D printer, I'd be extremely tempted by these because they look rad. They also have a couple of stretch goals that they've unlocked already. They've unlocked a guardhouse and a chapel, and just some really cool stuff, like some like basement type things. And everything's all modular. They all lock together. They've unlocked torture tools for the dungeon and furniture and like these sweet mushroom things. So if you have a 3D printer and you like printing things, well worth it in my opinion. Look at that library that they unlocked. It's beautiful. I would love to have that. It's just awesome looking. So anyway, I think they're really cool. They've unlocked a bunch of goblin stuff too that's a little more fairy looking, and crystals and ruins. Really cool. I love pretty much everything that they have in this. It's just really neat. All sorts of new extra bonus items. So this is a solid campaign. If you have a 3D printer or access to one and want some nice fantasy terrain for a decent price, honestly, like, so the all-in price on this is $150, and you get all of it. And that's an amazing deal, in my opinion. Beyond that, Tabletop World is also doing a Kickstarter, and I've seen some of their stuff on a few other channels like Luke's APS. He's talked about them a few times. It's all resin cast terrain. They're at 61,000 of their 40,000 goals, so they've smashed it. They still have 18 days. Technically, it's a little past on that. But I back this, is why I have it up on the screen here. I think the stable's great looking. Their pricing is... it's a little tougher because they're not US based for us US guys, but they are really cool. Oh, actually, you know what? I think they're in Arizona now, I think about it. But anyway, they're really cool. The stables are neat. The design is intricate but modular. The doors open and close. I do really like the way that they make the different roofs match, so you can make just a little hovel or just a little blacksmith hut, and it's pretty reasonably priced for what it is. You can also add an extra tier onto the stable and that kind of thing, so it's really cool. That one's just, if you type in Tabletop World, that'll come up, and it's a 32mm, and they've promised that this is real scale 32mm. I will say that their horses look like they're just generic, like I went to the farm store and bought a toy horse looking. I know they're to scale to 32mm, so it's different, but they look really generic. But anyway, the rest of it's awesome. Saltford Miniatures, I'm highlighting because They've hit their goal. They're at 10,000 of a $4,500 goal. They've got 9 days left. These guys are Salt Lake City based, and I try to highlight anybody that's in this area when I can, just because there's such a strong community out here. This is for literally one character, just Sulfurus. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he is a massive model. And he's just absolutely gorgeous. He's humongous. It's a limited run of 300. He is huge. He's gorgeous. The amount of sculpt in this is just phenomenal. He's just under 10 inches tall, and the detail in his fur and skin is just insane to me. I love all of the details they did in his mouth and along the sides of his armor. He's really cool looking. I would love to have this guy sitting on a shelf somewhere, because he's not really so much as somebody you'd play with as a work of art, because he just is like stunningly cool looking. So you can find that under Salt Forge Miniatures. This is their first Kickstarter that they've done, and they're killing it. Looks great. We also have the Caldore Project, which is an RPG sandbox campaign setting. It's based for 5e. They're struggling right now. They're at 1.6 thousand out of 3.6 that they're looking for, and they've got 10 days left. So it's a little bit of a push on it. It's a really interesting setting. They've got 35 cities, towns, and villages, new classes and monsters, and they really wanted a lot of side content and interesting lore for things. I think it looks really cool. They have decided to go digital only, and I think that's what's hurting them the most on this, and the fact that their interior art isn't really up to snuff with the cover. The cover's this really lush, interesting painted style, and the interior art's a little more amateur looking. I'm not really super sold on that, but the maps and the world itself looks really interesting, and I think that they're really hurting themselves by going digital only, because I know I, as an RPG fan, like having the books. Even if it's a game I'm never playing, the books to browse through and have there and be able to flip through as inspiration is a completely different experience than having them as a PDF exclusively. So I think that might be part of why they're struggling with their current project, but it is called the Caldore Project, Kaldori, and they've got 10 days left if you want to check it out. Pirates of the Dread Sea ends in 4 days, and they are $1,400 away from hitting their goal. Pardon me. I hope this happens, because this game looks awesome. Although, to be honest with you, the game doesn't really... It's just a skirmish game. However, the miniatures in it are amazing. They're just old school pirates. Humans, skeletons, a parrot, pirate chest. They're super cool looking. I am really excited about this particular one. I'm watching it right now because unfortunately I don't think I'll have the money to back by the time it ends, but I definitely want to snatch up some of this if it ends up getting made and available at a retail level. There's a a whole band of dwarf pirates, which is amazing, and I love it. The mermaids are kind of iffy, but they've got a little bit of an old school miniature look to them, which I love. The dice are cool. They've got skull and crossbones on them. It looks awesome. It's called Pirates of the Dread Sea, and it's just it's a fun skirmish game with pirates. I don't know how you go wrong with that, frankly. You can get the rule book itself for $25 US. The crew itself is pretty reasonable. 7 of the human crew is $27, which is pretty legit, honestly. You can get the rule book, the human crew, and the skeleton crew for $75, which isn't much of a discount, but it's a pretty good deal all the same. I think it's awesome. Pulp Fantastic is a Savage World setting that is a 1930s secret society superhero pulp game. It's got 9 days left, and they're $1,000 away from hitting their goal, so I think they'll hit it. It's a fully licensed Savage Worlds one, so you know what you're getting into as far as the game system is concerned. And it's just an old school printed by drive-through RPG where you're playing 30s pulpy awesomeness. It's really simple. It's basically a PDF. Print and PDF is $20, and that gets you the at-cost voucher, which I really like. I appreciate the idea that I can go to Drive-Thru RPG and pick my paper and my finish and everything else and then have it printed and mailed to me. I think it's a cool way of doing RPGs, in my opinion, and I think these guys are doing a solid job with Pulp Fantastic. The Dragon's Garden ends in 35 hours, which will be pretty tight by the time this is actually released. But it's 50 forest encounters for 5e or any other RPG. They're at $8,000 right now of their $3,000 goal, so they're kicking it. This is their first Kickstarter from Quest Chests. And their graphic design's great. It's very RPG appropriate. It looks like 5e. Their art is amazing. It's really gorgeous, like lush digital art of boars with mushrooms all over them, and weird robotic crab creature animations, and dragons and skeletons. And I love the way they do their maps that are like these up-down shots of ponds and lush greenery and caves. I think it's really neat. I think they do a really good job with what they've done so far. They've got a couple of stretch goals that they've unlocked, some new maps and encounters. To get in on this, I believe the book itself is... the full soft cover's only $20, which feels incredibly reasonable to me. Shipping's $6 to the US, so $26, and you get a PDF, the map making assets, and the full soft cover book, which is pretty sweet. Yeah, I'm really down with this. The Dragon's Garden, really nice looking group of encounters for RPGs. They're also out of Salt Lake City, by the way. The Blood Queen's Defiance ends in 61 hours, and they've hit over $40,000 of their $24,000 goal. And what this guy is a 5th edition RPG design that uses a DM-free system utilizing cards. I love cards for RPGs. I know not everybody does, but I really like playing games with cards. It adds that randomness. It gives an element of interactivity to people when they get to draw their own treasure from the loot deck kind of thing. And what this does is it has a bunch of encounters designed off of cards, and they have each player kind of design their own custom encounters for the night's play session. And it kind of a cooperative running of it, which I think is really interesting. Their campaign page is super simple. I think they've unlocked a couple of their stretch goals, but their graphics aren't super clear on that. It looks like they've unlocked inspiration point cards and pre-generated characters, which is cool. So their reward level starts at $20 for print and play, but to get the box set is $40, which is pretty reasonable. That includes 80 plus cards plus a book for $40. Plus you get the PDF of them. So that one's called The Blood Queen's Defiance. And that's pretty much our Kickstarter roundup right now. So there's a lot of stuff out there, but nothing heart-stopping for me personally. There's a couple of things that I backed right away and now I'm reconsidering. And there's a couple of things like the Dragon's Garden that I haven't backed that I should back. But that's my rundown. I hope you guys enjoy these type of videos / podcasts. I'm going to try and do them a little more often because there's something I can do on the road when I'm at cons and that kind of thing as well. And just kind of keep stuff on Kickstarter that doesn't get mentioned in every other video about Kickstarter projects, because there's some of these I feel like really need the attention, especially these smaller RPG projects that are super cool, reasonably priced. You don't have to pay $120 for a huge box game. I mean, you can get every item on my RPG tab for the cost of 2 of the games on the game tab, and that's coming from somebody that wants to make games for a living, but you know. Anyway, thanks for listening. This is the Reformed Grognard signing off, saying may you live in interesting times. If you'd like more from Deeply Dapper or the Reformed Grognard, you can find us on deeplydappergames.com. There you can find links to our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook pages, as well as our other podcasts. You can also find us on Patreon at patreon.com/deeplydapper.